Hello everyone. This video will be a follow-up to my previous video, the origin of the N-word and if it should be used. The reason why I'm giving a follow-up to that video is because I went over what I believe is the origin of the N-word, namely Latin, and then which is where the Spaniards and the Portuguese got their languages, and which is where the N-word comes from. However, of late, I've noticed when looking at the quote unquote competition on YouTube, I've noticed that a lot of the black scholars are referring to the N-word actually coming from the Africans themselves, and that it doesn't come from Latin, which is what I said in my video. So I'm going to expound on why I believe the term, as I said in my previous video, comes from the Latin and subsequently the Spanish and Portuguese. The NG sound, according to these black scholars, emanates from Kemet and Carthage, which were both ancient black civilizations. We know that Kemet was ancient Egypt for sure. Carthage, some people don't believe so. I believe so, but that's a story for another day. It just to let you know that they come from the Phoenicians is something that definitely is interesting, and I think eventually more will come out about it that will prove that they were black, and that the Canaanites of what is now Israel, including the people that are the Arabs, so-called Arabs from that area, were actually black. But that I don't think it's been proven so much yet, but there has been a lot of information to come out about that. But as I said, that's a story for another day. These black scholars who claim that the NG nga pronunciation or word or what have you comes from the Africans, and that it supposedly means strong person or something to do with God or what have you, which may or may not be true. If it is, I'd like to see documentation on it to show that is the case. But even if it does mean that, did the term get to the people who enslaved us? And if so, I want to see documentation on that. According to these people, the Romans got the nga from the Carthaginians, whom, in case you didn't know, they conquered and destroyed their civilization and city, which was at the time more developed than theirs was. But and obviously, if they got the nga from there, then perhaps that's why these black scholars are saying that the term for black in Latin, which is it has different pronunciations because it has different forms, but Nigar, or however you want to say it, Negro. I mean, it has different. The one of the the emperors, Nero, it meant black. So there were different forms of the word black for black in Latin. But if they did indeed, the Romans, that is, get the term nga from the Carthaginians, then I want to see documentation on that to prove it, not just hearsay. Moving along to the time that we were enslaved, namely the 15th century, mid 15th century, not so much, but yeah, mid 15th century, and definitely the 16th century is where supposedly the term got introduced to our enslavers, the Spaniards, Portuguese, etc. And supposedly it came from the Niger River. Now, the Niger River, how it got its name, the Niger River, excuse me, is called, and was in the 16th century, called a different thing by each of the main 10 tribes or ethnic groups of the area: the Yorubas, the Igbos, the Berbers, or who are in that area are called the Tuaregs, the Mandingos, the Hausa, the the Fulani, etc. Those are the only ones that I know of, but there are a few more from that area. But each of these ethnic groups has its own name for the Niger River. However, according to historians, as far as we know, the term came from a traveling scholar by the name of Leo Africanus. And he obviously chose the term that the Tuaregs were using. And the Tuaregs, again, are Berber people. And this Africanus, Leo Africanus, who converted to Christianity from Islam, he wrote a book of geography on West Africa, and he mentioned the Niger River. And the name of it is Sahara della Descrizione dell'Africa e della cose notabili che ivi sono, which was published in 1550. Remember that year, 1550, in Italian. And you might want to know why he chose, and I do too. I have my suspicion why he chose, of the 10 languages, the name coming from the Tuareg or the Berbers is probably because he was Berber. That's, yeah. Why didn't he use Yoruba? Probably because he was Berber, and so he used the language of his own people to give the name of the Niger River to the Europeans, in this case, the Italians. And by the way, it means, again, it's the name of the Niger River. It is, don't ask me how to pronounce it, but it's this is where these black scholars are saying that the Nga, or it comes from, and how black people all called themselves from that region, West Africa, because all of West Africa, basically, most of West Africa is near the Niger River goes through most of West Africa. So supposedly this is where the term, the N-word comes from. And it actually means river of rivers in Berber. That's what is believed to be the case. Nobody's sure from what I understand. Um, West Africans at this time, who are the ancestors of most people from the United States and even other blacks from the Americas, like the Caribbean, South America, so Central America. These were our ancestors. And at this time, they were at war with each other. They were disorganized. They were not, they didn't look at each other as brothers and sisters. There was no unity, which is why the Europeans were able to enslave us. So why would they all come together and say to call themselves Nga when to be named after excuse me, a river, which they didn't even, that it was only the name in one language, which was the Berber language or the Tuareg. So again, if there's proof that the Nga, as I said earlier, some people believe that it means comes from the word for God or so forth, and ancient Egyptian, which would be Coptic, I assume. If that's the case, prove the evidence. And as the what's called the hearth of Egypt, maybe it's called something else, but the hearth of Egypt, ancient Egypt. What that basically means is that I think it was a little bit before the time of Christ, when they were invaded by probably the Persians or the Greeks. They fled, many of them fled to different parts, in all different directions, south of Egypt and west of Egypt. There's definitely proof of that. So they did go into different parts of sub-Saharan Africa. However, if they took that term, Nga, which means God, give me proof of it. And I'm not saying that that's not the case, but I would like to see proof of that. And I would also like to see proof that some kind of documented evidence, primary sources, or I'll even take maybe a secondary source to show that the Europeans who enslaved us got that term or that name from the Africans, and that they didn't get it from their own word for black, which is negro, however you want to say it, which comes from Latin, and then Spanish and Portuguese, not necessarily in that order, Portuguese and Spanish. Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón brought enslaved Africans to South Carolina and Georgia in the early 1500s, which was about 100 years before the first English settlement of 1619. And his successor, when he described, he wrote, again, this is my documented evidence, because as a historian, I'm taught to give sources, and especially primary sources. In a primary source from him, he refers to the Africans that were brought to Georgia and South Carolina as Negros, and this was in 1526. Vasco Nunez de Balboa, who is the father of Panama, I mean the currency is named after him. I lived in Panama for 5 years. He referred in 1526, earlier than 1526, 1513, to the Africans, or he said that he saw Negroes in Panama. So did, by the way, so did Christopher Columbus, and he wrote it in his diary, or journal would be a better term for his voyages. On his fourth voyage, he went to Panama, fourth and last, and he said that he saw black men, tall black men, going down the river, if I remember correctly, in Panama. Again, the term for Negro, or for black in Spanish is negro, which is where I believe the term, the N word, comes from. And so I have documented information to support what I'm saying and what most historians say. Ruy Lopez de Villalobos went to the Philippines in 1543. And guess what? He, sometime in the 16th century, sometime thereafter, but in the 16th century, a group or tribe, or you may as well call it a lost tribe of Africa, because if you look them up, they look like just like us, but they're smaller, of small African people, African featured definitely people. They, guess what they called them? Negritos, and they're still called Negritos, and it's offensive to a lot of people who hear the term. The reason why is because Negritos means little black people. And so if you speak Spanish like me and Portuguese, you'll learn that ito is the diminutive in Spanish and Portuguese. And so if you, in order to have the diminutive, you first have to have the original word. For instance, so in other words, what I'm saying is if they were called Negritos, there had to be people who were called Negros before them. And to illustrate, if a man named Juan has a son and he names him Juan after himself, in Spanish culture, he's called Juanito. So the Juan came before the Ito. So that shows you, that's living proof, because they're still called Negritos. And the term, no doubt, came about in the 16th century. Like Indians, which is what Christopher Columbus mistakenly called the Native Americans when he went there, because he was lost. He was trying to take another route to the east, to the spice, trying to find a new spice route to the Far East, but by going west. But he ended up in the Americas. So when he saw these dark-skinned people, he thought they were Indians. And so he called them that, and they're still called Indians. Even Native Americans call themselves Indians. So why did he call them Indians instead of, when wherever he went, he saw all these people. He called them the same thing, even though some of them had different features and so forth, no matter where he went. So it was a collective term. Likewise, for the Europeans to come across all the different tribes in West Africa, and you can include Angola. I think the Congo is included as well, but mainly in West Africa, where the Niger River is. If they came across all these different people of different tribes who obviously had different names, the easy way to refer to them would be the catch-all term, which would be a term that would describe the way they looked, Negros. Inigo Ortiz de Retes went to Papua New Guinea in 1545. Again, these things that I'm telling you about occurred before the 1550, which was when the Niger River got its name in according to the Europeans in his book, geography book, that he wrote in Italian in 1550. So all the things that I'm telling you about are perhaps the Negritos. We don't know exactly when, but definitely the Christopher Columbus. All these are the Balboa saying he saw Negros. All these people wrote Negro before the term Niger River ended up in a European book. So that's my documented evidence to say that it's likely that the term comes from Latin and not the Niger River. But he caught, when he went to maybe it's Micronesia. I think it's Micronesia, which is Papua New Guinea. It's north of Australia, and they're African featured people. They're they look like us. I know somebody who went there and said that they are like us. They obviously have a different culture. Originally, they're even now. They dress like us, most of them probably, but they still, a lot of them, they put on the garb of the prehistoric times, hunter and gatherer type of clothing. But Inigo Ortiz de Retes, the Spaniard, when he went to Papua New Guinea, when he went to that island, he called it Papua New Guinea. Why? Because the Spaniards and the Portuguese already knew the people from Guinea, West Africa. So when he saw them on this island, the black people, he said it was New Guinea, Papua New Guinea. So he named them. He didn't ask them, what do you call yourselves? He named them. Just like the person, let me get his name. There's nobody, we don't know exactly who named them. The Negritos in the Philippines, they didn't ask them, what is your name? They just looked at them and said they're little black people, so we'll call them Negritos. So they were in the habit of naming people. Okay, so it's more likely that they named us Negros because of our, collectively, and because of the way that we looked, and not that they asked us what we were called, and then we all got together and said, call us Nga, because it means God or whatever you believe it meant. It's unlikely. Again, if you can prove it, please show me a primary source that backs up what you have to say. So as a recap, I'll give you a timeline. 1513, Vasco Nunez de Balboa saw Negros. 1513. 1526, the successor of Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón wrote about Negros in South Carolina and Georgia. 1543, Rui Lopez de Villalobos went to the Philippines, and later the black people there were called Negritos, the little black people. 1545, Inigo Ortiz de Retes arrives in Papua New Guinea to name the black people there New Guinea, after the West Africans that he knew. So he named them. He didn't ask them what they called themselves. He named them. 1550, the word Niger River there's the first time that historians know of the term Niger River being that river in West Africa being called the Niger River. So it's unlikely that the Africans that were enslaved got their name from the Niger River, because it came after all of these incidents of black people, enslaved black people being, or not even before they were enslaved, the ones that were free, as for instance in Panama, being called Negritos, black people.